Hi, all. I wanted to go live and let you all know just a little bit about hobbies and how you can have hobbies on a modest income. And so, how do you choose which hobbies you should spend your money on, and how do you keep those costs down? So, a couple of small bits of advice here. First off, everybody needs hobbies. We need things that we enjoy in life. We need things and reasons why we go to work and earn money. And those incentives and those hobbies are things that help incentivize us to get through the day at work and to have things to look forward to. So, I suggest everybody have several hobbies. First off, I people need to pick an indoor and an outdoor hobby, at least one of each. And I also suggest that you have at least one of each of an active hobby and a less active hobby. So, for example, active hobbies, things that involve exercise. You got to have at least one. We all need to exercise to stay healthy. And so I suggest you have at least one active hobby that involves, exercise, whether that be going to the gym, golfing, playing pickleball, hiking, biking, skiing, water skiing, jet skiing, surfing. There's so many different active hobbies out there. Playing tennis, playing baseball, playing soccer, all of those are active hobbies. You got to choose at least one and maybe more. And then you would want to have a less active hobby, such as knitting or crocheting or crafting or gardening, or maybe even fishing might fit in that less active hobby category. Something that you can do that if you were to be physically unable to do your physical hobby, that you could do this. Also, it's great to have a less physically demanding hobby because you can uh, do that when you're tired as well, and sometimes when weather is bad or you can't do your other more active hobby. So that leads me into the idea that you also want to make sure you have outdoor and indoor hobbies. The weather is not always on your side. And so having an indoor hobby, such as playing cards or uh, crafting or indoor gardening, is another. Swimming at indoor pools, that can be an indoor hobby. Working out at a gym, those are all examples of things that you can do indoors. That way, when the weather is poor, you're not stuck without a hobby or without a physical activity. Outdoor or outdoor hobbies are going to be weather based, and so it's going to depend on where you live a little bit. For example, I used to live in Colorado. I grew up in the mountains. It was cold a lot of the year. There was snow on the ground a lot of the years. And so we embraced hobbies such as ice fishing, cross country skiing, downhill skiing, snowboarding, snowshoeing, a lot more than you might in a warmer climate. A warmer climate might be, let's say, at the beach, and you can do things more often like surfing, maybe even golfing, because it's more months of the year. And not to say you can't do some of those things in a colder climate, but again, you have to tailor it to what you have. Not every climate is conducive to every hobby or every location that you live in and have available to you. Okay, so enough on that. Where does the frugal living on the modest income but still getting to enjoy the hobbies come into play? Uh, I brought it and started this video with picking your hobbies first and narrowing it down. You can't do everything in every single hobby. I always suggest to people that you really think it through before making a large commitment. So I'll take skiing, for example. I do ski. I grew up in Colorado, and it is a big commitment. You have to have skis, boots, poles, bindings, etc., or you're going to be paying to rent them, which is really expensive. Not to mention that the ski tickets themselves are very expensive as well. And you have to live somewhere that might actually have ski hills somewhat nearby, or be willing to fly somewhere to ski. And then again, you start adding in all of the expenses. So before you make the commitment to that, you have to ask yourself, how many times am I going to use this? Is this like a one-time thing? Or once a year, maybe it will just make more sense to rent that equipment then and give it a try and see if you like it, and then determine if you're going to do it often. Because again, it's a big commitment. I have invested in it, even though I don't get to ski all that much, but skis can last quite a long time. And I got good deals on them. I shopped at resale stores and off season at some of the ski shops, and was able to pick up things really reasonably priced. Ski boots for around $100. I think my skis were actually brand new, and they weren't all that expensive either. And along with my bindings, the poles I've had probably since I was a kid. They're really old. Ski poles don't change that much. And so I've collected that over the years. I grew up skiing. So again, I had some things like ski pants and a lot of cold weather gear, things like goggles and stuff like that I already had. So it wasn't as big of a commitment for me. But if I lived in Oregon and had never skied before, it would be a huge commitment to now start it up. And then it's like a 3-hour trip to the ski hill and back. I probably wouldn't have purchased skis at this point in time. Same thing goes for snowboarding. It may be a little less expensive to get outfitted, but again, you have to think about, it's not just the snowboard and the bindings and the boots. It's also having a rack on your car. It's also maybe having snow tires on your car, so when you drive up to the hill. It's also, do you have hills available to you, and how much are those tickets going to cost you? Do you have snow gear, a ski jacket, snow pants, all that stuff? So just keeping all that in mind. It's okay to pick an expensive hobby. I don't want to say you should never have expensive hobbies, but you have to pick them wisely, because you can't afford every single hobby. I'll take, for example, kayaking. I live where there's several spots where you can go kayaking, and I've really thought about, should I invest in some kayaks for our family? And I've really gone back and forth, but I really thought to myself, how many times are we going to use those kayaks? Because every time we use them, depending on how many of us go out, we're going to have to load them all up. And then that's going to mean we're going to need like a trailer to haul all of our kayaks in, which our cars don't have hitches on them. So then we'd have to do that and get a trailer. And then every time we want to go, we'll have to load that trailer, drive somewhere, unload them. Plus you need life vests for everybody, and the actual kayaks themselves. And you're starting to have a lot of money. Plus you got to have somewhere to store them. And unless you're going to enjoy it regularly, it might not be the investment you should make. I saw some kayaks for rent at our local lake, and I thought, you know what, if I really want to go kayaking, I'm going to go ahead and rent some kayaks, because even though it seems like it's really expensive for one time, it's not when you consider that, if you were to buy them, you'd have to all of those other expenses. And so I've got a couple of places that I can either rent them, or we have our national park here that does some kayak tours that I've done before. So I've had other opportunities to kayak that I didn't feel like I needed to make that investment. Same thing goes for camping. My family used to camp. And camping, it can get really expensive. We bought the bare basics. We had a tent that could fit our family, and we all had a sleeping bag and a pillow. And we bought a few other fun things like some flashlights, and we had a camp stove, because of course, part of camping is saving money by cooking your own food. And so we bought some different camping items there. And we went camping many times when my kids were young, because that was a cheap way to vacation at our state campgrounds at beautiful spots. I live on the Oregon coast, lots of beautiful campgrounds very close by, especially during the summer when the kids were out of school. And so that made sense. that made sense to invest in that stuff. Well, the next step then, and lots of Oregonians do this, they buy either a trailer or a motorhome. And I've really contemplated that one too. And it's like, well, unless I can guarantee that I'm going to go out really regularly, I am either better off like renting a camper, or what we did a lot of times was I had to get on really early on the reservation sites, but I was able to get some yurts sometimes because we started getting tired of sleeping on the ground in our tents. So then I would get on early and get into the yurt situations. But I would also consider potentially renting an RV or a camper. I did see some sites where people do it almost like Airbnb, where they were renting out their camper. I don't know how common that is anymore, or if that was more of a COVID thing, but you can go to the RV companies and rent them, but that gets quite expensive. So that would give you a chance to try it and then really see, because that's a huge expense you're looking at. So some other hobbies, golf. Golf can be really expensive too, but my family's taken up golf and we mostly spend our time at the one driving range that we found near our house. And it's a little bit of a drive, but we spend our time doing that. My dad had some really old golf clubs that he gave us, and we've just kept our eyes out for replacement clubs on those, either at Goodwill. We've seen a few, or my son had a friend that was on the golf team that sold us his old clubs. So now we have enough clubs that we can go, that we don't have to rent clubs. And they're not great, but we're not super serious yet. And we do a lot of the driving range, but we have gone out golfing. You have to really price the golf courses there and find the ones that fit your budget. And once you get better, that's kind of like skiing. Once you're better or need that more variety or challenge, then you spend the more money for the better courses or the better ski resorts. But at first, you can start at the mom and pop ski resorts. You can start at the smaller golf places, and you might even find that you like those just as much as the big places. And again, another great way to save money. All right, so these are just some of my tips in saving money on your hobbies. I have some more specific videos, but this will get you started on the conversation of hobbies, because this is really where people can get into financial trouble, because they buy really expensive things to get into a hobby. I'll take fishing, for instance. You might buy a boat, and then all of a sudden you're buying a bunch of rods and licenses. And so you really have to look at those hobbies and determine, is this a hobby that I'm going to do often? If that's the case, maybe you want to start making those investments into that hobby. But once you start making those investments, make wise investments. You want good quality stuff, but you also can shop around for bargains. As I said with the skis, I went to ski shops after the season was out and was able to get, that's pretty much how we've gotten our nice ski jackets, ski pants, and most of our ski equipment was doing it that way. Some towns have things like ski swaps where they have big ski sales once a year. You can do that. And with your other hobbies as well, you can really shop around and get some bargains. The key is to not just rush into it and just buy everything off the bat. You want to make sure it's worth your investment. And then you also want to make sure that you buy the right things for the right prices, rather than just saying, oh, I want to start kayaking, go out and buy a bunch of kayaks and a rack and everything without properly researching and spending the time to get to know what you need and getting the best stuff. So that's my financial advice today on hobbies.